All right, let's talk about the number one reason projects go off the rails: the money. But it's usually not about the numbers themselves. Nope, it's the failure to plan. Today, we're doing a deep dive into the plan cost management process from the PMBOK guide. And we're not going to treat this like a textbook chapter. Think of it as opening up a consultant's playbook for getting your project's finances right from the very start. So let me ask you this. You've got a budget, right? A number. But without a real plan, what is that number? Honestly, it's just a hope. I've seen it 100 times. That number becomes a source of pure panic down the line because there was no strategy, no framework behind it. A plan is what turns that hope into control. It's what lets you steer the ship instead of just being along for the ride. So here's our game plan for today. First, we'll zoom out and see the big picture. Where does this all fit? Then we'll get into the why. Why is this step so critical? Section 3 is the main event, a deep dive into the mechanics: what you need, what you do, and what you get. After that, we'll actually crack open the plan itself and see what a great one looks like. And finally, we'll talk about how to make this work in the real world. Okay, before we get into the nitty-gritty, let's pull back for a moment. You have to understand where plan cost management fits in the grand scheme of things. This isn't some isolated task you check off a list. It's the strategic first domino in a chain that's going to dictate your project's entire financial story. You see, project cost management is really a four-part journey. Think of it like building a house. Today, we're talking about step 1, creating the blueprint. Now, if you mess up the blueprint, what happens? Well, everything you build on top of it, your cost estimates, your budget, your ability to control spending, it's all on a shaky foundation. This first step isn't just a good idea. It sets the stage for everything else. So we know what we're doing, but let's talk about the why. I mean, why have a whole process just for planning the plan? Why not just jump in and start estimating? Well, it's simple. You have to set the rules of the game before you start playing. You don't want to be making up the rules in the middle of the fourth quarter when everything's on the line. And here's the official definition from the PMBOK guide. Look at those keywords: defining how. See, this process isn't about coming up with a dollar amount. It's about building the system. It's the framework, the procedures, the policies. This is where you literally build the machine that will control your project's finances. So let's just boil it all down to this one key benefit. This plan, it's the firewall between order and chaos. It's all about proactive guidance. By doing this work up front, you create consistency, you get everyone on the same page, and you stop your team from just winging it when the pressure's on. It's your best defense against reactive, chaotic budget management. All right, now for the core of it all, let's roll up our sleeves and really break this thing down. We're going to look at the process just like the PMBOK guide does, in 3 parts: the inputs, what you need to get started; the tools and techniques, the work you actually do; and the outputs, what you have to show for it at the end.
Let's start with inputs. You can't just create a plan out of thin air, right? You need some raw materials to work with. Think of these as the essential ingredients you have to have on the counter before you can even start cooking.
When you look at these inputs, they really fall into 2 big buckets: stuff from your project and stuff from the wider world. On the project side, you've got your project charter and your project management plan. These give you your guardrails. What's our budget authority? What does our schedule look like? What risks have we identified that could blow up our costs? Then you have to look outside the project. Enterprise environmental factors. These are things like market conditions or currency exchange rates that you can't control but that can absolutely wreck your budget. And then organizational process assets. Now this is the gold mine. This is your company's past experience, policies, templates, and most importantly, data from old projects. Any top consultant will tell you this is where you learn from past mistakes. This is where you find out if the last 3 projects like this one all went 30% over on materials. That's something you really need to know right now. Okay, so you've gathered all your inputs. Now what? This part is all about the tools and techniques. This is how you transform all that raw info into a solid, actionable plan. This isn't just paperwork. This is where the real thinking happens.
The PMBOK guide highlights 3 key techniques here. First up, expert judgment. And no, this isn't just asking your buddy for their opinion. This is about formally bringing in specialists in finance and procurement to really pressure test your assumptions. Next is data analysis. This is where you make huge strategic calls. We're talking about modeling different scenarios. For example, should we buy this off-the-shelf software or build it ourselves? Buying it has a big upfront cost, but predictable maintenance. Building it might seem cheaper at first, but it comes with a massive risk of cost overruns and support headaches forever. You have to analyze that. And finally, meetings. And I mean focused, decision-making workshops, not those meetings that could have been an email. This is where you get your sponsor, your team, and your key stakeholders in a room to hammer out the details and get the buy-in that makes the plan actually work.
So we've taken our inputs, we've applied our tools and techniques. What do we actually get at the end of all this? What's the one big deliverable that this whole process is designed to create? It's really that simple. All that work, the analysis, the meetings, the expert advice, it all gets funneled down into one single critical document, the cost management plan. And this isn't some file that lives on its own. It becomes an official part of your overall project management plan. It's the single source of truth for every money-related decision from here on out. So we've created the plan, but what's actually in a great cost management plan? Let's crack this thing open and look at the components that make it a powerful tool, not just another document that sits on a shelf collecting dust. The PMBOK guide absolutely nails the description here. The whole point of the plan is to describe the how. In other words, if anyone on the project team or any stakeholder has a question about how we handle money, the answer needs to be in this document. It's the official rulebook. This right here is where the plan really earns its keep. Let's look at a couple of these, because the details are everything. Control thresholds. This is so important. This defines when a cost variance is just a bit of noise and when it sets off alarm bells that require you to take action. Is a 5% overage okay, or does that trigger a formal report to the steering committee? You decide that now, so you're not arguing about it later. And then there are the EVM rules. That's earned value management. This is where you define how you'll measure performance. It's not just about asking how much did we spend. It's about asking what did we get for the money we spent. Because you can be under budget but way behind schedule, which means you're not performing well at all. EVM gives you that true insight. Every one of these components strips away ambiguity. Okay, on to our final section. And, this might just be the most important one. It's great to know the textbook process, but what separates a good project manager from a great one is the ability to tailor their approach. It's not just about knowing the rules, it's about knowing how to apply them to your specific situation. So the big question is this a one-size-fits-all process? And the answer is a huge, resounding no. The PMBOK guide talks about tailoring all the time, and it's especially critical when it comes to cost. The amount of detail and rigor you apply has to match your project's size, its complexity, and the way you're developing it. This slide really gets to the heart of it. In a traditional predictive project, you try to lock down the scope and schedule to protect the budget. The cost is what you're trying to control. But in an agile world, that whole idea is flipped on its head. Often, the cost and time are fixed. Think of a 2-week sprint with a set team, and the scope is the variable you adjust to fit. Your entire mindset for planning has to change depending on which world you're living in. And beyond just agile versus predictive, you've got to think about your company's environment. Are there specific financial systems you have to use? Does the company have its own strict estimating policies you have to follow? Is earned value a mandatory requirement on projects over a certain size? Your cost plan has to fit within all of those organizational rules. So let's end on this one thought. The whole point of everything we've talked about today is to create a living document that actually guides your decisions every single day. A plan that sits on a shelf is totally useless, but a well-made, thoughtfully tailored cost management plan, that's a compass. It gives you direction and helps you navigate the financial storms that every project faces. So the real question is, which one are you going to create?